As adults, we get pretty obsessed with having a plan. We set goals, we chase outcomes, and we measure our lives by how things finish. But what about just starting? Why does the simple act of beginning something new, an act that's totally natural for a kid, feel so incredibly scary for us? Okay, let's get into it. So this whole explainer is built around a really provocative idea. The author of our source material basically frames childhood as a kind of sickness, a state of ignorance and immorality that needs to be disciplined, trained, and ultimately cured. It's a deliberately shocking thought, and it's meant to make us question everything we think we know. And that quote leads us straight to this huge question. Is childhood just something to be corrected? A messy, flawed phase that we need to educate ourselves out of as fast as humanly possible? Well, today, we're going to push back on that idea hard. And it really comes down to this clear contrast. On one side, you've got the adult mindset. We start to hate new things, we get obsessed with results, and we often disguise what the source text calls a visceral panic of the world as just being, morally responsible. But on the other side, you have the child. They're constantly starting over without a second thought, finding pure joy in the act of beginning, and just naturally breaking all the rules.
So here's the big pivot. What if, instead of trying to cure childhood, we could actually learn from it? What if we could somehow tap back into that fearless, incredible power of just beginning? Well, the authors of our source text came up with this brilliant little thought experiment to do exactly that.
They call it the magic backpack experiment. And the whole point is to take a very serious, very structured, very adult idea and see what happens when you just shake it up with a bit of childlike chaos.
And here is our very adult starting point, the title of the academic book this whole analysis comes from. It's so formal, right? So orderly. Philosophy for Children. Conceptions of Childhood. Everything flows in one very predictable, very grown-up direction.
So here's how the experiment works. Imagine writing each one of those 10 words on a little slip of paper. Then you toss them all into what they call a backpack of foreignness. Think of it as a magical space that messes up language and strips words of their normal power. You give it a good shake, and then you start pulling them out one by one. And voila, here's the result. On the left, you have that neat, orderly, adult phrase. And on the right, you have what came out of the backpack. At first glance, it's just a jumbled, poetic mess, right? Children for Philosophy, Moral End, Childhood of Conceptions. The words are the same, but their new order completely flips the world they describe on its head. So let's break down what this actually means. All right, let's start with the first chunk of our new scrambled sentence. Instead of philosophy for children, we now have children for philosophy. It seems like a simple flip, but it completely reverses the power dynamic. It makes you stop and ask, wait, who is actually helping whom here? See, the original phrase, philosophy for children, is a totally top-down idea. It assumes that philosophy with a capital P is this big, finished adult thing that we have to simplify and deliver to kids. In that world, we adults are the givers, and the kids are just there to receive our wisdom. But this new phrase, children for philosophy, suggests something completely different. It suggests that maybe it's not that children need philosophy, but that philosophy needs childhood. The kids, with all their noise and endless questions, actually rescue philosophy from its own stuffy adult seriousness. And to even get close to that idea, the authors say, we adults have to metaphorically squat down, get closer to the ground, and let go of our privileged high and mighty view of the world.
Okay, let's move on to the next radical shift. Our magic backpack took the phrase moral education and scrambled it into moral end. Now, this isn't just swapping words. It's a huge leap from a world of rules to a world of pure creation.
So instead of thinking about instilling morals in someone through education, this new phrase talks about the conclusion of morality, the end of the moral. What on earth could that possibly mean?
And the beauty of this new phrase is that it's so wonderfully ambiguous. A moral end could be the finish line for morality as we know it, or maybe it's a purpose that exists beyond our simple rules of right and wrong. Or maybe it's just the last little trace of a rigid system that's already on its way out. It just opens up so many more possibilities.
This idea is captured perfectly in Nietzsche's famous allegory. He said the spirit first becomes a camel, carrying the heavy weight of duty and morality, the world of you must. Then it transforms into a lion who roars no and creates freedom for itself. But the final and most powerful transformation? It's into a child. The child is a new beginning, a sacred yes-saying, who doesn't just follow or break rules, but creates entirely new values. The child isn't the starting point to be overcome. The child is the ultimate goal. And this brings us to the final inversion from our backpack experiment, and trust me, it's a big one. It's about changing not just what we think, but how we think. It's a shift from solving problems to, well, undoing them.
Here's the last word swap. The adult phrase, conceptions of childhood, got flipped into the childlike phrase, childhood of conceptions. It might sound subtle, but the change in perspective here is absolutely massive.
The original phrase is all about what we adults do to childhood. We study it, we analyze it, we form concepts about it. We basically treat it like a bug under a microscope, something to be pinned down and understood from the outside. But the childhood of conceptions asks us to do the exact opposite, to stop analyzing and start affirming. It asks us to approach our own ideas with a childlike spirit, to embrace babbling instead of rigid arguments, to create what the authors call a community of infancy, where the whole point isn't to find an answer, but just to explore. It's not about playing by the rules of the game. It's about finding the joy and creativity in the game itself.
So we've taken this little journey through the magic backpack. We've unpacked these weird, upside-down phrases. So let's put it all together and see what it actually means to start living and thinking a little more upside down.
Here's a quick recap of our journey. We started in the typical adult world, where philosophy is for children, where we focus on moral education, and where we create our own conceptions of childhood. But by shaking things up, we landed in a childlike world, one where children are actually for philosophy, where we look for the end of the moral, and where we embrace the childhood of our own ideas.
And hey, this isn't just some whimsical idea. The famous philosopher Jacques Derrida actually connected this to his own work. He said that deconstruction, taking things apart to see how they really tick, is all about undoing the problems. And then he added, nothing more childlike. He's saying that real deep inquiry is, at its heart, an act of childlike wonder.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Look, this is not about acting childish. It's about embracing a childlike openness. It's about having the courage to shake up our own beliefs, to turn our world upside down for a minute, and to see what amazing, unexpected wisdom falls out of our pockets when we do. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. In our relentless adult race for answers and solutions, what if we've been missing the point all along? What if the goal isn't really to have all the right answers, but just to get better at asking more playful, more profound, more childlike questions?